Decolonization has broken the spirit of indigenous people in many cases. Decolonization keeps people in this state of enemy, alienation, in between two worlds, frustration, anxiety, big hole in their soul. The only way to restore that and to make it full and whole again is to put them back into connection with the land. Because it's not only the connection to the land that is achieved in a physical way. Sure, health is reestablished because they begin to eat healthier foods. They eat traditional foods. They become more physical beings. You know, they act more. There's that physical component of the restoration of the body. But there's also, if you want to learn how to take a perch from the St. Lawrence River at a certain time of year and how to do it properly, and you're taught in Mohawk, and you spend 12 hours a day doing that with other Mohawks, talking about perch and grass and water instead of at the mall or watching TV or doing whatever, you're inherently becoming more cultured. Your community is becoming more unified. You're becoming closer, and you are restoring the very thing that colonization took away, which was your unity, your connection to the land, and your connection from each other, and your understanding of yourself. Besides that, you're insulating yourself simply by virtue of the amount of time and energy you spend doing that from the negative influences that are out there on the outside, which affect all of us, but which particularly affect Native people because they don't have the cultural means to actually balance and understand themselves in this outside life, unless they completely surrender to it, which is a whole other discussion too. Assimilation is still a possibility in this society, although you do pay a spiritual price for that, for talking to people who have done it. But when you're talking about decolonization, actually I should say, you guys haven't talked, I'm the one who's talking. When I'm talking about decolonization, that's really what I'm talking about now. And it's been a long journey from understanding it as hating the white man, hating the Indian Act, which I have to admit I still do, you know. Nothing personal against any white people here. The white man is a metaphor for white power as it's been put on top of us, and yes, I hate that. And I hate the idea that one society and one group of people thinks they have the one right way. They have the one right way, and everything else has to accommodate that. That's what reconciliation is. That's what Indian policy is. That's what mainstream society's view of natives still is, really, is that you guys were left behind. You guys are somewhat backwards. You guys, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you're not keeping up with progress. And that's the general sense of things, and I still hate that. But I'm not going to obsess about it because I have kids now. And I know that the kids need to learn how to be natives and don't need to hear me hating on the white man all the time. They get small doses of it, just to keep them motivated. Because they are Mohawks after all, so I got to keep them motivated. But I also want them to spend most of their time as young men learning how to be young Indigenous men in terms of their responsibility. What's my responsibility in this sense? To wait for the eventual collapse of Western civilization? I don't think so. May happen, but it's certainly not happening. I'd place bets in my lifetime or yours. Wait for land claims? That's just as good as betting on Western civilization's collapse, I would say. How many of you believe in December something 2012? Well, that's just as real as resolving land claims, I think, at this time. And consider all of these opportunities that are there, all of these options. The real option for me, really, is expressing ourselves in terms of a dedicated commitment to loving our mother, the earth, and teaching our children their responsibilities. It's that simple. You know, so complicated. So complicated before for me, but now it's so simple. And if my kids can be more Indigenous than I am, then to me that's decolonization. I still got all those other things I hate, all those other fights, totally support other people who have different commitments and stuff like that, but I think that this is an element of decolonization that hasn't really been talked about before. It was assumed that people would heal by doing those other things, and it's just not the case. And so what it does is kind of expands the notion of decolonization to include these very specific practices in very specific ways, and decolonization in a very personal sense, and then channeling that, because remember what I said, you know, this master-apprentice thing that I'm talking about in Aguzasne, teaching people how to be Indigenous on the land, it's not an end in itself. It's still radical, I would argue. It's still radical in the sense because what you want is strong generations of Mohawks willing to defend that right. So here's the political element. So a lot of people might say, then maybe Naho, or maybe even the Canadian government might say, that's a beautiful thing you got going. You know, you're teaching Native kids how to fish, and you're bringing them to youth camps and things like that. Great, let them see it that way, because what you'll find, I believe, is that when kids grow up that way, when they grow up speaking the language and understanding it and the ceremonies, they are being taught how to be a true Ngwihungwe, and when they are that person, they're not going to let anyone take that away again. They're not going to let anything happen to that environment, and they are certainly not going to let another St. Lawrence Seaway come through and wreck it all over again.